Hello, friends. This is ForceCenter, a show, a podcast, a feed, a universe about Star Wars, pop culture, and the ultimate adventure. Life itself. I'm Ken Napzok. You can check out our regular shows that we have weekly with me, Joseph Scrimshaw, and Jennifer Landa. But right now, this is a special presentation of the show we have around here called Blank is Why We Love Star Wars. I'm Ken Napzok, author of the book Why We Love Star Wars. Hey, check it out. Pick up the book. But here we dive into one thing, one love, one character, one idea, one concept with a guest, and they get to tell us why they love that thing and why that thing makes them love Star Wars. Do you get it? All right. I'm glad you're here. Today's guest is actually a returning guest. He first appeared on the show to talk about why Jar Jar Binks is why he loves Star Wars, along with Jerry the Canon Junkie. From the Bombadcast, we have Scotty Jayro here today. Scotty, welcome back to the show.
I'm absolutely honored to be here. To be on with Jerry was special. To do this again with you is even more special. And I don't know, it's a reoccurring thing. So we've been talking a lot leading up to this, and it's very exciting.
And I don't mean to split you guys up. Jerry knows what he did. He knows what he did. He knows why he's not here. No, one of the real big reasons you're here is Star Wars Celebration Japan. Star Wars Celebration 2025 is just around the corner. And you're not just heading there, you're a part of it. You have a panel, which is more of a presentation, I'd say, titled Midi-Chlorians, an Alliance of Science, Mythology, and Magic, based off of, well, I'll let you explain it, but it seems to be based off a wonderful video you have on the Bombadcast. Tell us a little bit about that and how you got it and how excited you are, and maybe even how nervous you are. But I've never seen you get nervous.
Okay, so funny you say all that, because I am not nervous for the most part. I'm a middle school educator in Louisiana, so I have been on stage presenting things for the last 6 years every weekday. So that part's not making me nervous at all. What does make me nervous is how many days away it is, and it's less than 20 at this point. And I've been really preparing for this now for pretty much 2 years unknowingly. I put a video out in February of 2024 that is, I believe you agree with me here, the most comprehensive analysis on the subject out there on the internet. Truly, it's 2 hours of a pure, direct quotations, complete story ideas all thrown into one huge presentation. And this panel is essentially going to be an addendum to it, where we add things from the Bad Batch, we add things from the Acolyte, we add things from research I didn't have before. So it's very, very comprehensive, and I'll give you some more details here. It is 176 slides, and I have been telling myself 55 minutes of lecture. So you gotta bring your folders. Make sure I will sign your report cards that you passed it and you were there for it. But it is extremely comprehensive. It's if anything, it's more thorough. I got it professionally edited. I paid an editor a couple $100 to edit it, so it is truly its own thing, and it's gonna be very special. And it's on Friday, April 18th at 3 p.m. JST. Will there be a live stream on our channel? Maybe. We're going to figure that out later. But anyway, it will be recorded. So
this is fantastic. And I if you clicked on this podcast or the video, today's episode is called Midi-Chlorians Are Why We Love Star Wars. That's why Scotty's here. But all this is fantastic. I love what you did. And yes, you and who you are as a teacher, an educator, and a presenter and performer really came through on it. What I loved about it is I felt like I was getting a lesson in the most wonderful ways on Midi-Chlorians and all the things about it. So we're going to talk about that, as always, with the show. I don't really have anything planned. I just love finding the starting points and going from there. And you said you've been preparing for this presentation for the last 2 years, and before that video, the lecture you have out there for maybe months to years before that. But really, you started planning for this in 1999. Let's go back, as we did with the Jar Jar video, to 1999. And Obi-Wan, sir, Master Yoda said something about Midi-Chlorians. I have a question. What are Midi-Chlorians? I'm paraphrasing there. But Scotty, what are Midi-Chlorians to you then?
I wrote in my presentation, and let me actually I have the pages right here for it, if you don't mind. I wrote verbatim.
Everyone turn to your presentation to Matthew chapter 3, verse 36. Yes.
Honestly, you say that, but it does feel a lot like that. To be real, this is what I wrote here. Okay, I'll read it verbatim. I obviously whenever I thought about this, I never really reflected on it. I just knew in my gut I had to do this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really kind of r- came to me in more of a not like an epiphany, but like just the more you think about what this is as a narrative device, it came to me as more of a realization in the sense that it resonates. It
Mm,
resonates to me in ways that even my own faith doesn't resonate with me. Emotionally, philosophically, ideologically, like
yeah.
they represent the very nature of what I feel our universe is, and
Mm,
they reflect how I see the world and the opportunities we have every day to make a difference. And this book, this presentation will
mm,
explain why.
okay.
And
Yeah.
I think people will
Mm,
when experiencing it will understand that it's so much more than just a
yeah.
narrative device. It is a philosophical framework. It
Yeah.
is everything it should be in Star Wars.
Yeah, what I love about what you've discussed about before, and I want you all to check it out if you're watching or listening to this episode of what Scotty has up on the Bombadcast. I can drop some links down below, all the good stuff. But you really hit on the stuff that we've enjoyed about midi-chlorians around these parts. And Joseph and I have had those discussions. Jennifer and I and Joseph have had those discussions. And a lot of it begins with what happened in 1999, which I want to discuss, not just your experience, but I'll share a little bit of mine a little bit more. But what it means and the full picture of it, and the fact that there was this became a quote controversial part of Star Wars, if you will, because it seemed to be too much of an answer for magic. But what I love about what you've done is you have kind of said, no, 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 this isn't explaining magic. It's a combination of science,
Yes.
mythology, and magic. And it's so much more than what you saw on that screen with a moment in time in the Phantom Menace.
Mhm.
But you, as a youngster, you are a Phantom Menace generation fan. What was your initial interactions with the concept of midi-chlorians?
I was 5 when it came out. So
Perfect
for
age for
me,
science.
absolutely brilliant. But I mean, I grew up in a time where like this was something that was kind of looked down upon,
Yep.
and it made the Force more scientific, quote
Yep.
unquote. But it really doesn't. It honestly makes it more mystical, and the very nature of who we are is somewhat mystical too. But how I chose to engage with it, and how the world chose to engage with it from that time on, I think I think that's
Mm,
changed a lot. I think people are
mhm.
more embracing of this aspect of Star Wars, whereas it's not the case then. And you can tell us firsthand what that must have been like.
It was, and Joseph says has some wonderful things to say on just the idea of like, hey, we all sat down and we didn't want things explained like I said earlier, but it has to do with a lot of the prequel angst. It's layered. The prequel angst is layered, but my generation sitting down there, early 20s, it was not just midi chlorians. It was just this. Well, I never thought of the Jedi Order as that. I thought those robes were Uncle Owen's farmer robes. Now they're actually the
Mhm.
outfit. What's a Padawan? Like, we got a lot of new information. Lore
Yes.
began in a lot of ways with that film, even though we had
Yeah.
spent some time in the mid 90s with some EU lore and everything. But also, you just spent your entire lives with it. So we were predispositioned to kind of be resistant to a lot of the things, which I give my generation a little grace over. I just think it's what you do with that information later on. For me, the midi-chlorians was I'm a big fan of Jake Lloyd's performance in The Phantom Menace and what he brings to the character of Anakin Skywalker and later Darth Vader. But that is one of the more moments that's a little bit of the old, George, you can write it, but you can't say it,
Yep.
and you've got this kid delivering it with full heart. You got Liam Neeson fully in on it. I think it's a solid scene, but it's like that was one of those moments of when you get in the car afterwards and you go to the Applebee's bar, or for us Chili's bar on Reseda and Northridge. It was just like this, like I don't know what to do with that. So therefore, especially when it comes to pop culture and in that time and going forward still to this day, if you don't know what to do with something, you start tearing it down before you even
Yep.
get a chance to understand it. And I think that's where we were in 1999.
And it's funny because in this presentation that I have,
Mm-hmm.
at no point do I mention at any point that scene, because that scene really isn't that fruitful of a scene in terms of lore, in
Right.
terms of what they actually mean. And I think that's the only frustrating part because the whole, and we've talked about this before, but the whole point of the Phantom Menace is that something needs to be in symbiosis with each other. It could
Right.
be the cosmic
Yes.
and the living force. It could be the Gungans and the Naboo. It could be
Right.
the literal Phantom Menace, like being a actual parasite seeping its way into society. Like there's so many things that movie does so well on a thematic level, and Midi-Chlorians is one of them. But in that one
Yes.
scene, that is not what drew me in. That is
Yeah.
not what drew me in at all. Because
Okay.
because George obviously has Qui-Gon explain it, but in his explanation, it becomes a little bit messier. And
Right.
like all the best midichlorian quotes come from George directly, or they
Mm.
come from Clone Wars, or they come from things like even Darth Plagueis
Yeah.
or Revenge of the Sith, right? Like
Mm.
they don't get mentioned after that. And they
They
haven't
don't.
been since, the Bad Batch mentioned it for 2 seconds, but that's about it. It's
Yeah.
upsetting,
Right. They finally say they did say midi-chlorians, right? Or
Asajj Ventress just came out and said it, but for the
yes.
longest time there was M count. And you got to realize, someone like me who actually cares about this stuff,
Oh yeah.
it was like the most painful thing because it's just the work. It's just why? Why are we doing this? Why are we dancing?
This show goes where it needs to go. I want to stop right there, right now. Jumping to where we are now. Yes, and Ventress says it. But even in Mandalorian, I'm not upset when they drop M count, but there's a
No,
little bit of
not.
a say it, you cowards. But it's
Just do it.
fascinating that there is this view, and I would love to know from Filoni or Johnny Favs or anyone how they came to the M count. Why? Is it one of those things? Jar Jar, midi-chlorians. Sometimes I feel Padme is off the table, unfortunately, where they just don't
Dude,
say her name
you're
as
so
much.
right.
And there's gossip and lore behind a lot of it, but it reads as we have to protect. Not I don't know if protect's the right word, but we have to choose our words wisely because otherwise we'll turn people off. If Dr. Pershing says midi-chlorians, suddenly people are like unsubscribe Disney Plus, unsubscribe from Disney
I'm
Plus.
scared.
And
Well,
maybe that's true, but I refuse to accept that.
Acolyte. It happened in Acolyte. And that
Right.
show is pre-Phantom Menace. You would think that the word midichlorians would have been just used casually.
Right.
But even in the Acolyte, they were like, their M counts are the same. I'm like, oh my God, we're so close. We're so
close. And like, I'll say this, and you're right. By Attack of the Clones, it's pretty much gone in a way. Revenge of the Sith, in a way, it's gone. It's not as direct, and that also connects with the Jar Jar of it all. And I kind of give George the grace and even the excuse because George has this like, wow, they effing hated me anyways. Like, I'm just gonna whatever. Sure. But then they come back to it in Clone Wars and everything like that. But for now, like we got folks like you. The prequel generation is strong. Like trust it. That's my only thing. When it's like, say it, you cowards, is like have some fun with it. The first mention of it was fun, but now I'm like, just do it, man. Do it.
Yeah. I think we'll come to a time where it does become more accepted. And I'm not saying that I'm at the forefront of it, but the more
I'm saying you are.
I know you are, but the more people that see that I have this panel, I've gotten messages from people that I don't even know on Facebook as of like, oh, we can't wait to come see your panel.
Oh,
and I'm like, I guess there's finally some sort of revolution that I guess I'm spearheading that people actually care about this stuff. Because yes, I've heard y'all talk about it on ForceCenter. I've heard other podcasters talk about it. And I know it's something that people aren't scared to talk about, but I'm afraid we're still at the point where it's misunderstood. Because I do want to clear the air here. Now that we're early in this episode, at no point has it ever been the equivalent to an XP chart in a video game or a power level ranking in a video game. That is something that fans, for some reason, gravitated towards and said, this is what they mean. No, you're abhorrently wrong. It is not that. The only reason they did that in the Phantom Menace is to show how powerful Anakin was without having a dad that was had some sort of force latency in him. The same can be said about, his mom, Shmi. So like and he was obviously some sort of virgin. He was born of the force. So like, I hate that the second that line was dropped, over 20,000, like, oh, that's not even, Master Yoda doesn't even have that many. And like, that's a problematic statement because that is what people in the 90s, or even people now would go, oh, wait, that means he's most powerful and he's got the highest power. He's more powerful than Yoda. Not what it means.
He's
not
leveled
much.
up, man. He's leveled up.
Yes,
Yeah.
is
Yeah, no, I'm
exponential
with you.
start.
Look, it's easy. I'm not an expert at this, is why I love talking with you about it. It's just become one of my favorite concepts because of its connections to the deep themes in The Phantom Menace alone. The symbiotic circle stuff runs all through that movie, and I think all through Star Wars, which is one of the things you do so well, explaining and connecting to the larger picture. And it's just fascinating stuff. What changed for me? And then I want to jump back to when you're 5, and then as you get older, and as this concept that was part of this space fantasy thing you fell in love with, why you zeroed in on it. That's where I'd like to go with you. But for me, the it was I had less angst over, well, now you've just gone done and explained it. But people would tell me that, so I guess you're right. But it is what you're talking about, the leveling up. It can get murky fast. I think there's a little bit of, George just, does what he does. And I think later on in the Clone Wars, you had people around him to help explain some of the bigger concepts in a different way, not a better way, just a different way that made sense to me as a fan. But when I first, I don't know, it could have been a Star Wars insider. You might know in your presentation. The first time it was like, oh, this comes from something real. The science behind it is George is pulling from stuff. And it's part of this bigger picture. And that's when I kind of just had there's other things I'm trying to work through, but that's not one of them. And therefore it became interesting to me from that point on.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it more than likely there's a force.net entire article that was written in 99 about what they kind of really mean, and I forget who wrote it. It's in my citations for this panel, but it specifically breaks it down he's looking at it from a perspective of the whole theme of the story and how it relates to Anakin as a character, not just it is a power level system, and that's okay if that's your interpretation. Then we all get different things out of this at ForceCenter and at Bombadcast. We're completely fine with you having your own thoughts and opinions, but when you really dig deeper, it goes so much deeper than just it shows skill.
It begs you to dig deeper, and that's why you're right. We here at ForceCenter, we put our caveats. We welcome as many as we can to the table, unless you're just an a-hole. We don't want you here. But other than that, explore the things that you have problems with in Star Wars. Explore the things you don't fully understand. And this is one of the things for me that has continued. My appreciation of it has grown, in part because of the video you put out. I love what you did. In part talking about it with Joseph and Jennifer for over the years of just going, here's what it means and here's what it can mean as well. It's become more fascinating to me. But I want to go back to when you're 5, and then a couple years later you're sitting there for Attack of the Clones. Now you're a Star Wars fan. At what point and this could be much later. I don't know. This could be much later. At what point was this something that you were like, I want to understand more of?
You know what? I can tell you exactly when it was. And this is something that I do bring into light with the scene in Revenge of the Sith in my presentation. When Palpatine and Anakin have that full discussion about, Darth Plagueis. And I know it's that's one of those, double entendres where everyone's like, that's the best scene because it's blah, blah, blah. Sure. It is really good.
It's one of my favorites too. Yeah.
But it's the visual symbolism behind it. And I remember watching, because when you walk in, Palpatine's watching of course, what they call it, Squid Lake. And you see the visuals of it. And maybe it was a subconscious thing, but I always thought that was such an interesting visual of these creatures jumping in water and they're floating from orb to orb to orb. And here I am. I'm not kidding. I can tell you where I was. I was sitting on this couch right behind me for those listening. And I was watching with my good friend Eric. And Eric loved, when back in the day when you were on Schmo and everything. And we were talking about, what that scene visually represented. And it was actually in that moment. This is years later. I was not a kid when this happened. This is me, the 23-year-old man. And I'm watching this. And it clicked because I had just started teaching biology to middle schoolers. We had just gotten to the life cycle and how cells and reproduction works. Everything. We just got to all of that, and it clicked when I watched it. And I can tell you the exact moment it was. You saw one jump through, and I said, "Is that the sperm and egg cell? Is that what that really is?" Because no one's ever talked about what Squid Lake is supposed to truly represent. No, George has not mentioned anything. If I were to talk to George, that'd be the first thing I asked him, because it's nothing but these weird fish creatures and streamers jumping into a giant liquid orb. It looks like conception. It just does to me.
It looks science-y. No,
And
no,
then
yeah,
and then the whole conversation in that entire scene is about what? The
mhm,
creation of a life or the
yes,
saving of one's
yes,
life.
yes,
And I was enamored with this idea. So I sat on this idea for years. And
mm,
at no point when I was a kid, I don't think I really cared about midi-chlorians. Truly,
sure.
I it was something that happened to me within the past 6, 7 years that I was like, oh my god, like that's it. That's it. It's so much deeper than that. And then upon research, Ken, it just became
Yeah.
entirely too deep. It became something that I was deeply fascinated with.
Scotty sat in his room for hours, just
I
mumbling to
did.
himself, M counts, midichlorians, M counts, 20,000. It's off the charts. Higher than Master Yoda. He would just he scribbled it on the walls in blood.
Did.
First of all, I'm highly amused at the fact that if you would meet George Lucas, maybe you run into him at his museum when it opens, and you're like, "Sir, I have one question." He's like, "Oh, here we go." And you're like, "Was that a sperm going into an egg
Was
in
it?
Squid Lake?" And I bet he'd
I'm
be like,
telling you.
sit down. We have to talk. Yes.
I'm thinking, and I'm not kidding. I don't want to toot my own horn. I know all of us are really good at what we do, and we have a great time doing what we do. But I
Yeah.
think this presentation would be one of the few things he'd have to actually come to and be like, what is this all about? This guy, Scotty guy, I think he figured it out. I think he cracked the code. I
Look,
mean that wholeheartedly. I
look,
do.
this is possible. Okay, this is possible.
Really?
I'll tell you why it's possible. I was at a bar years ago for a friend's birthday party, and someone comes up. His name's Henry. Had a little something to do with the Clone Wars, and
Okay.
we introduced. And a friend goes, "Oh, he works at Collider," and he goes, "Oh, Collider." And that famous or infamous deepfake video the first one that kind of came out that was
wow.
George, which I had nothing to do with, and by this point was out of the company, getting out of the company, and he goes, "Oh, did you the deepfake photo, the George deepfake?" And I went, "Look, I'd like to before I could say the word apologize." He goes, "George loves it. George loves
Wow.
it," and it had gotten through him via family.
Mhm.
And George was completely
Wow.
amused and enamored by the technology in a way. And I'm not speaking for him here, and I want to speak to out of school. So what I'm saying, I think we can get this to him.
If I'm not kidding, that would be my life's goal. And like I said, just a 5 minute conversation would be peak, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
like, not to say I know what he's trying to do with all this, not to say that I'm in his mind, but when you look at George as a person, and
Yeah,
like the whole first part of my presentation is a direct quote from George Lucas setting up the whole thing. Because I mean,
yeah,
and you know this, George was in that really bad accident when he was 18 years old,
right.
right? And it's all about how after that experience, he started to feel and see connections to other living things in the world that he never would have realized had connections to, because
Mm,
it made him appreciate life, not
mm,
just life as an I'm living life, like
right.
the actual aspect of life so much more. He
Mm,
became my biologist by hitting a tree. Like I know it sounds
right.
crazy, but
No.
like that's the case. He fell in love with the ideas of like, well, what causes life to want to live? And in his quote, literally verbatim, he says, like, life is no different than it is for a tree or an ant or us. We just all experience life. And, you know, we got to be thankful for that. We got to realize that it is a very interesting thing that we do go through this, and the people listening or watching are going through this as well. And
Mm,
something about them said, let's click on this video, right? And
mm,
what dictates that? What dictates those interests to the point where you want to have this experience in your life? You want to understand this. So it's one of the more kind of stonery sounding things, but like I but what isn't science? Science is supposed to make you feel big brained. It's supposed to make you
right.
feel special. And if you can take Star Wars and add this aspect of philosophy and add this aspect of the Force into it, like, yeah, why not? You know,
Mm,
it's been there. Like
yeah.
midichlorians have been there since day one, and people don't want to admit it, but like I can cite specific moments where they have been, right?
You talking about prior to the prequels in George's prime?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. You know
Mm-hmm.
they have. It's
Mm-hmm.
since he was 18. But,
Yeah.
you know, was he as blatant with it? No, because he knew in the new trilogy he could do whatever he wanted. No one was stopping him in 99. Not a single person. Not even Rick.
Not even Rick,
No.
which by the way, I think we can get this to Rick too. Let's just all find a way to go hang out with Rick, because I think that's still one of my goals in life. I could talk for hours about Young Indiana Jones Chronicles with him. Yeah, no, I'm fascinated by that, about it being there before, because I think one of the things I will always love about the prequels, and came to appreciate obviously a little bit later from being 23, seeing it for the first time, and to where I am now, where this was George going, not just I can do what I want, but having the confidence and the position to do what he wants and explore it. I'm with you. I don't think he felt he could have, even if he had the scribbled note of midi-chlorians on a napkin in '74. I bet he felt, I can't. Jaws, Close Encounters, now the weird space movie with the micro biology. I don't know about that. Like, I don't think he had the confidence yet. He earned it to come back to it and explore it in a way that is rewarding, which is one of the things with this episode is Midi-Chlorians Are Why We Love Star Wars. It, for me, represents what I think it is representing for you. You, it's just maybe youth growing up. Me, it's at an older age, but coming back to something. I really, really always bang the gong of Star Wars has so much for you to engage with. Yes. And your initial entry into it is not the end of the journey. In fact, it gets better. And Midi-Chlorians, when you look at it from a different light, and you're not making the jokes, and you're not cracking wise on the scene that I talked about earlier or something like that. When you're engaging with what is there, engaging what is behind it, including interviews and a lot of the research you've put out there, it becomes, I think, one of, if not the most fascinating thing about the franchise.
Well, look, it solidifies these ideas more, and sometimes when you do research and this is someone who loves this kind of stuff, it kind of tears apart your expectations of what this can be. But when I research on this subject, it honestly makes me feel more enlightened on the certain themes in Star Wars that most people don't tend to focus on, right? Like, I love the idea of the living and cosmic force, and like, maybe, and I'm not, this is a gracious number. Maybe 5% of Star Wars fans even know what that is, right? Like, it's something that's taken for granted because, there's things in Midi-Chlorians that tie to other aspects of Star Wars that we haven't really had a chance to focus on since '99, when it should have been the focus. And I know George always had these intentions of making his sequel trilogy centric or their deal with Midi-Chlorians, but even then I think he might have just been blowing smoke. I'm not sure. You just don't know what these things.
With George, I bet it's tough because first you have to track the time of the interviews, the mood, what mood he's in that day of the interviews. Sometimes I hear the stuff about his episodes 7, 8, 9, where I'm like, he also could have just been upset and was like, you know what? I'm going to give you a total microbiology-based story. I'm going to go deep into the microverse.
And he could have, and I would have loved it. I don't know about everyone else, but and that's the thing. When you research anything in Star Wars, there is some sort of enlightenment you can find. Like, but there's also things that you can get stuck on. Like, I love the idea that there's now a Hero's legacy lightsaber, and now it's buried in the sand somewhere. Like, that's all really, I love all that. It's all really cool. But like, there's certain deepness that you can only go to. But like, when you look at things like, this is a mechanism for lore. This is a philosophical framework. How does this tie into my real world? Like, it's kind of incredible. And like, it's so much deeper than just it's the power center of the force. And that's what everyone said, right? That's the joke. But like, it's so much more than the joke, Yeah,
it's not a stat on the back of your Jedi baseball card. But again, I understand if people took it that way, 99, and then I think because it vanishes, you don't get a chance to explore it anymore. And again, it shows up in other places. As you fall in love with it a little bit more, and even in the last couple of years researching it, is there, I don't want to say is it directly changed or influenced your life, but how have you pulled it out, extrapolated it from Star Wars to and attach it to other things you enjoy or just your own existence? These midi-chlorians.
That's a beautiful question. I can honestly say it has made me reflect on things a lot more. Like, I was never one, like, even as a kid, I was never one to like just go stomp on an anthill. And not that there's anything really wrong with that, because you're a little kid and you're curious. But like, I'll never forget, like, and this is someone I work with, and I love this person, but like, I watched him just like go out of his way and kill like a grasshopper the other day, and I'm like, you didn't have. We're outside at recess. Like, that's something you don't have to. Like, that's we're in their area. So I always had this weird, relationship with like animals and things that I've always felt like, they're not for our enjoyment. They're there because they simply exist there,
Look, Scotty, you're talking to someone who once chased an ant around with a Dixie cup, one single ant in my bathroom to move it. We don't like spiders in our house. I'll get the scream and the call from Grace in her office. There's a spider in there. We don't
Yeah.
smush them. I have literally a spider catcher. I go get my catcher and I chase it around until I can remove it. I'm with
Yeah.
you on it. And I think and please continue your tale here, but I think there's something in the Phantom Menace that this then pulls out midi-chlorians, where that's why it's beyond science for me. It is about
Yes.
what the movie is saying. It is a
Yes.
symbiotic circle. We can make the jokes. We can do our boss nass, but it is a pretty powerful theme that we see the non-believers in empathy,
Mhm.
compassion, and that we're all here together have unfortunately dominated our society in the
Mhm.
darkest of ways, forever and the last 10 years. And I really mean that it connects to Phantom Menace and the midi-chlorian concept to me.
It does. And look, and truly, like, and I'm gonna take it to a really deep level for a moment. Like, I've had and I'm gonna say the word privilege, but I've been around the privilege of watching both my grandfathers pass away peacefully on,
Mm-hmm.
on
Mm-hmm.
their own terms and on their
Yeah.
deathbed. And like something about that really does change your wiring of like you hear that death is such a horrible, scary, terrible thing, and in some scenarios it really is that. Like, we're
Mm-hmm.
not going to make light of that, but like to experience someone who is alive and living and full of life to then lose their life, and you watch this moment happen, there is this idea of like, wow, now where does all that energy go?
Mm-hmm.
And like,
Mm-hmm.
I know it sounds silly, but like I think about Qui-Gon a lot when he dies and Obi-Wan's holding him, and like, in your gut you're like, he's gone, but he's not gone. The memory
Mm-hmm.
of that person still lives on. And I feel that same way about my grandparents, and
Mm-hmm.
the memory of not just the memory, but then later that he is, and of course, a part of the force, and you can channel that person anytime you just concentrate and think about their energy and who they are. And
Mm-hmm.
like, and sometimes that person manifests. Now, I'm not saying that ghosts are that or anything like that. All I'm simply saying is that there's a peacefulness that comes to accepting life in the same exact way. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not I'm not trying to imply that midichlorians are my religion, but like there's a certain thing
I'll allow it.
that brings me comfort knowing that like
Mm-hmm.
these things happen, and you
Mm.
have to be okay with the fact that these things happen, and the more you accept it, the easier life can be. And the people that have a difficult time accepting a lot of this stuff, you can see they get torn up by it. And I mean, there's some scenarios where it's horribly bleak and you can't
Yeah.
accept it.
Yeah. And
But
there's tragedies and yeah.
of course, but you can also begin to realize that it is a very deep thing to understand that those people are gone, and you can then channel them back through you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
I really no, I love this. I wouldn't want to have a conversation about midichlorians without getting wonderfully weirdly deep. Um, I feel that in the sense of it's almost I'm thinking of even the conversations with Yoda and Anakin of the dreams and the fears of death and the loss of his mother and the potential loss of Padme. There is a symbiotic relationship between maybe fear and acceptance and hope and the whole concept of letting go. We've even discussed not debated at all, but Joseph and I had a discussion from two different perspectives on Yoda's conversation with Anakin there. But I think it has a little bit of a lot to do with what you're talking about of having the ability to even through the tears and the pain, and you
yeah,
know it, and you've gone through it. We've all gone through of being able to say goodbye. That is the hardest thing to do, and I do believe Star Wars is dealing with that constantly, and that symbiotic relationship between carrying it with you, but also letting them go, is a driving factor in a lot of things, in a lot of ways. And it's in that conversation with Qui-Gon and Anakin. To me, it's in that conversation with Yoda and Anakin. It is in you cannot stop the change,
no.
Anakin.
And look, the Sith are the opposite too. If you really want to think
Yes,
about it, the Sith are
yes,
the opposite of, if you're a Jedi, you embrace it, you accept it, and you know that they're one with the Force, and that they could come back anytime if you just will upon their experience and who they are, and you can think about them in terms of memory. But that's what makes a Sith just as compelling, because
yeah,
we all have friends that have a hard time. It's called denial, right? It's called the five. There's those 5 steps happen after death, because
mm,
the first thing is denial,
yeah,
and it's not just a river in Egypt. Denial is a very, you
yeah,
know, it's sorry, I had to throw one in there. But denial is that, right? I mean, when Padme dies, no, it's not possible. I could feel
mm-hmm,
her. She was alive. I felt it. Like denial. And then it feeds this man down his entire dark path. And that's why Vader becomes who Vader is, and he denies it and he doesn't accept it. and he tries to unwill it from happening, right?
And he becomes, as he tries to become, and in many ways does become, the most powerful person in the galaxy, and as I always say, stomps down every hallway trying to get what he wants and never does. And then, and not to turn this into an episode 9 discussion, because that might who knows what that will do with the audience. But that's why I fight for the inclusion of Palpatine in that movie, simply showing up to say, I refuse to let go, as opposed
Yes.
to Luke and so many others saying, it's time to let go. It's at the center of Star Wars, and it's at the center of grief and fear versus hope and acceptance and all those kind of things. None of that with lacking pain, but it's there.
I'm so glad you said this, because I wrote this in the presentation. This dark resurrection reflects on the Sith's reliance on forbidden practices of genetic manipulation to avoid death. Unlike the Jedi, who view death as a return to the Force, the Sith seek to preserve their physical existence at any cost. Ray Carson describes this creation of Palpatine's genetic code, Dathan, obviously all that. But like, that's the whole heart of Star Wars, is like acceptance, right? I mean, you got to realize, when Obi-Wan stood there and he had the blade slashed through him in A New Hope, he accepted in that moment. He had fought, he had brought back the two twins together on a ship unexpectedly. He did that. The Force willed that into existence. And when he accepted it, he knew that he had completed his journey. That's why he became a Force ghost instantly. You know what's funny? Everyone's like, well, how did Ben Solo never got the training? It has nothing to do with being trained, and it's blatantly stated. It has nothing to do with it. If you accept both aspects of who you are, every aspect of who you will become one with the Force. That is exactly as it's stated. Yoda says it in the Clone Wars, or Qui-Gon says it in the Clone Wars. So like, it's not something that everyone could be confused about. And I understand that the confusion originally, but like, now we're 5 years away from that movie, almost 6 years away from the movie. So like, I don't know. There's so much to be said about even the sequel trilogy, what they've done, with this exact same principle and concept, even though it's not basically or blatantly stated, it's definitely still implied. Honestly, dyads, dyads, they gotta share some sort of symbiotes. Is it midi-chlorians? What is it?
I do want to talk to the midi-chlorians themselves about if they had any part in restoring not just Palpatine's fingers but his robes, which I'm on board if they did.
Maybe.
It's still one of my favorite parts. I just love these. Like,
Jerry coined it. Jerry coined it Prom Night Palpatine. That's my favorite.
Prom Night Palpatine, because he thinks he's won. He thinks the final battle has been won. Yeah. I'm dressing up for the occasion. We're talking about the things I love about the sides of the midi-chlorians. We're really taking it religious. The holy trinity of the midi-chlorian: science, mythology, and magic. You and I are on the mythology and the magic. There's still a lot of science to it, and I'm not a sciencey person, so my eyes can glaze over. And I think but it was a stepping stone to a greater understanding, or at least I don't have the full understanding of midi-chlorians, but to taking that first step into the larger world. The science made sense, but one of the things you just absolutely do so well is you take it from that starting point, or from the power fantasy thing, which I agree with you. I understand if people pull that from Phantom Menace, but you tie it so well into the magic and mythology. How you do so good.
So I could tell you this much. I don't know if anyone else has really deeply thought about, like, where is the origin of religion and mythology come from? And I know Joseph Campbell is someone that I have a deep fascination with his research on this stuff. And his ultimate research comes down to the fact that mythology and religion simply come from rationalizing death. Something was there, and now it is no longer there. What is the reason behind? Where does that energy go? And the very first burials we see are from the Neanderthals. Someone that we're technically not even related to. We have some DNA of them, but they were a whole different species, and people tend to forget that Homo sapien and Neanderthals were two different sects of I guess human adjacent organisms.
Humanoid.
But anyway,
whatever.
All that, whatever.
Whatever.
But what I'm trying to get at is burial rites was that first understanding of this person is there, this person is no longer there. What does that mean? Right? And
what does that mean?
Where do they go? And you can look at every world mythology. Every single one is rooted in the concept of life and death. Of course, that's the human acceptance of everything. But I'm talking about, the idea that this is a nature principle. This is not, this is
Mm.
one of the more harsh things, life feeds on life. And that sounds really dark and scary because it kind of is.
Yeah.
Humans, the only reason why we can accept it is because we've built these things around us that we're like, oh, life's not so bad. But look at every other organism in the world. Life is terrifying. I don't care what anyone
Yeah.
says. You
Yeah.
can watch National Geographic. You can watch a leopard, rip apart a gazelle right now. Because that's terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
essentially trying to get at is the idea that, you know, once you can accept death as something that is, a pathway to understanding life, then you
Mm-hmm.
kind of can see that it is kind of cyclical. The Native Americans thought if you killed the buffalo and you honored the buffalo, that
Mm-hmm.
then what happens is the buffalo will return in greater numbers because you're thankful for their spirit. That's something that we're lost on now. I mean, I work at a school, I work at a Catholic school. We say grace and blessing, but like no one's out there killing the food we eat anymore. It's all
Yeah.
farmed. That I'm serious. That
Yeah.
connection to
Yeah.
hunter,
Yeah.
killer is gone. That was that hunter or prey is gone. When that
Yeah.
was a real thing, thousands of years, that's how we ate.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then this also the mythology of it all is like you've got hunter gatherer, but then you've also got planting cultures which showed up 10,000 years ago, and that's kind of how we're here now because we figured out agriculture. And if it wasn't for them, it's them appreciating life, it's
Mm.
them understanding how seeds work and harvesting works, and like that to me is the deeper aspect of Midi-Chlorians. It's like you
Mm.
it's you understanding how the world around you functions. You are going to be better. And I even
Mm.
get into, do you know what the Gaia principle is? You ever heard of that before?
It's my nephew's middle name,
Is it really
Gaia.
Gaia?
Gaia.
That's
Yeah.
cool. Okay, well, the Gaia principle is something by I guess a ponderer, a thinker, James T. Lovelock, and James Lovelock hypothesized that everything around us is in a sacred symbiotic dance. Like,
Mm.
you
Mm.
you are part of a greater organism. If the earth is a organism, we are all those microorganisms that make it up. And then if you take it even further out, we can look at, the possibility of other life. But the reason I bring all that up is because Native Americans figured this out. Okay. The,
Mm.
the problem is comes to other religions. I can tell you the Buddhists figured it out. In the Shinto Japanese, faith, they figured it out. You don't know when you go to a shrine in Japan, you don't know where nature ends and human craftsmanship begins. It's perfectly blended, right? It
Mm.
is effortless. But we live in a time, we live in a very Western civilization where we believe in the fall of man.
Mm.
And
Mm.
if you let's take a second and look at America. America was founded on the concept of
Mm.
conquer
Mm-hmm.
and rule. So what do we pave over every
Yeah.
time? We pave
Yeah.
over land. I
Yeah.
think that's the deeper part of it is us as viewers.
Mm.
And I'm not just saying Americans or anyone with more of a Western mind. We tend to think of this nature as something to be uh, sublimated.
Mm-hmm.
We got to push it
Mm-hmm.
down. We don't need to embrace it.
Yep.
Catholicism really does go into that.
Yep.
We can't embrace those natural instincts. And I think
Mm.
midichlorians is to me the idea of embracing the things that make you up. And I even write this in the book. And I'm sorry, I'm pontificating a lot here, but
Please
like right now,
pontificate.
you are listening to this right now
Mm.
and your heart is still beating. You're
Mm.
listening to this right now and you are still going through some sort of cellular respiration. You're
Mm.
breathing and you're not even realizing you're breathing. You're walking and you're not even like that is an amazingly intricate system. You can't tell me that's not magic. That's
Yeah.
magic, Ken.
Right.
Like to be able to to even talk to you and still function on a human level or talk to anyone or be or just being is a miracle. So
Mm.
to me that's where the mythology and magic come in. And like
Yeah.
when people the hubris of like, oh, midichlorians, like, oh, they're so stupid, but like
Mm.
don't you realize right now like your entire body is going through an extremely intricate process to just keep you alive? Like
Mm.
that's a miracle. That is magic. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that's kind of where I get upset with it is, yeah, people take advantage of, how important it is to stay healthy or whatever. But like, you got to realize that like, this is everything right now. That's magic. That's magic.
Well, you're yeah, no, you're talking about when it comes to like just looking at the midi-chlorians of it all, where it's like it's so simply tossed away as
Yes.
science, as if it was just science, that's a bad thing. Blah blah. That's not
Sure.
what I want people. I'm not saying that, but but whatever. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's so easy to be like, ugh, George explained away the magic. But if you see it as a doorway to something beyond your
Yeah.
imagination, which George was interested in, George, you've pulled a lot of things on what he's talking about. This is a deep thinker, man. This is a guy who knows, might have seen the light in a tunnel, was pulled back when he was 18,
For real.
and loves to explore it all and loves to build worlds too. You're talking about someone who's like, I think about what it would be if a planet had 10 levels down. Like, what would that be? And like, then we get Tion Madon, 10th level. And so it's a doorway to deeper thinking, as opposed to just looking at it as some weird word we didn't fully understand, and it turned the force into a stat.
But it's so much more than that,
Yeah.
and I'm glad
Yeah.
that we've gotten to a point where we can have these open discussions, because I don't think you could have done this in '99. I really don't. I don't think anyone would have taken the
Well,
time to really tear this apart the way it is.
no, yeah, no, and there may have been some folks, and I'd love
Sure.
to talk to those folks. May have been someone who clued on it right away. I had a roommate. Don't talk to him 20 years, but he was a roommate at the time Phantom Menace was out, and already, and the internet is still nowhere near what it is today, and all those kind of things, and there's conversations, and already people were like, I don't know about this Phantom Menace thing. And he and I've shared this ForceCenter before. He was a history major, and he laid out like, no, this movie is doing this. And I remember listening to him and going, oh, yeah, I see that. And he's just talking about, and then the British were down here in Africa, and they tried to colonize this land, and they marched over this, but they lost to the natives, and I'm just like, oh, I'm 23, like, I showed up for the pew 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 in a fast pod race scene, and I remember thinking he's on to something,
Yeah.
but then I kind of went, nah. And I think midi-chlorians fall into that. If you're not open to it, or you just want, and again, if you just want a Star Wars movie put on the background, you and I do that stuff all the time.
Of course.
But the reason, if Star Wars is in your heart, like it is you and I and so many others watching and listening today, these are the thoughts that you have. These are the conversations that I think fuel your love and make it even grow when you're open to it.
Look, I wanted to say your book, I mean, it deeply inspired me when I read it. And we talked about it years ago when you came on Bombadcast the first time. We talked about your book, and I just never forget reading it and going, this is inspiring me to figure out why I love certain parts of this fandom, and I've had the privilege to really look at a lot of stuff from different perspectives with Jerry and with you and with a bunch of other creators. But like, this is the one thing that, like, I don't know, you find your niche, right? You find what you're really good at understanding and looking at. And, for here, it's, I mean, since I was like 20 listening to y'all, like, I was like, man, they figured out themes. Like, they figured it out. They figured out how to talk about something poetically and give it actual thought, and not just go, that was a cool scene when this guy showed up with his blaster. Like, and that's great and all, but I feel more engaged when you engage with the text on a personal, philosophical, and thematic level. You get so much more out of it. And sure, it is escapism. Don't get me wrong.
Totally.
This is pure escapism.
Totally.
But it's not just that. It's something, it tells you more about yourself than you realize when you do actually dig deep,
And there's those moments, and this is what are, with your journey with midi-chlorians, as you get older and you're having these discussions, then you start researching it. There's things in Star Wars, and sometimes it pops up on the podcast where, there's sometimes I'm just looking at things, even from a show perspective of like, all right, let me make a note on that. Oh, I wonder if that means, what does that mean? Okay. And then in the discussion of it, sometimes live on the podcast, you almost hear the energy in my voice change, where I'm suddenly thinking about when I was 17 and this happened, or my life since I was 35, and Star Wars truly changes and inspires you. And I love those moments, and I love engaging it deeper. And I love the joy that you have for this concept that has gone a long way from its beginnings of 1999. But you know what I mean? Where you're just like, you didn't wake up one day and be like, you know what, I'd like to go deep on midi-chlorians. But maybe as you do, along the way, you're like, oh, I'm going through this thing in my life. And George was talking about this, and this means this, and M count, even the mention of it, that could mean that. Like, I love it. I love when a door is open in Star Wars.
It's an epiphany, and it's not always. I hate when people say this, because I know you came up in a faithful place too, and there's nothing wrong with coming up in that spot. But everyone's like, I heard the voice of God, and like, I'm like, as a Catholic still, and someone who is Catholic my whole life, and I struggle with my faith much like everyone does, but like I've never heard this voice. What is this voice? And this is the first time really that I've
Mm,
heard a voice. And it's not the voice of anyone. It's this idea that is spoken to me on such a deep level. And like, I don't know. You go on people's shows, you talk to people about it, and they're like they do a good job at talking to you about it, but like I've never been able to quantify my thoughts much like I have for this presentation. Like
yeah,
genuinely, I'm like,
right,
oh
right.
my god, like this is where it connects to, and this is why it means a lot to me. And like, am I ready for people to walk out? Yeah, I'm ready for people to walk out. It's a big topic. Like this is not something I'm expecting everyone to gravitate towards. And is the animation panel halfway through my panel? Yes. If people walk out, that's fine. But I know anyone that stays and really
Mhm.
reflects on it, or they take that part of them with you. This is not just and nothing against other creators. This is not just this is why this is cool. This
Yeah,
is, to me, this is you can get something out of this. Like this
you
is a thematic message that you can
you
actually get
you
something deeper from.
you really can, and one of the reasons, and as we jump around this conversation topic, is I think the George of it all. And hearing some of the stuff you've already put into your presentation, I can't wait to hear and see what you add to the presentation in Japan. But there's a lot of those George things that it's just fascinating, and I think other creators and those who have come after him have a great understanding of it, and I love hearing them talk about it, including Dave
Mhm.
Filoni. But when you hear George, there's something that, man, I can't explain it. Maybe you can't either, but I think maybe you understand. Where I'll read where he was like, "Well, the reason the reason Anakin did this is blah blah," and I'll just be like, "Oh my god, I wish I knew that when I was 17. Oh my god,
Boom.
that changes my view on my own life."
Yep.
And hearing him talk about Midi-Chlorians through you and some of the things you've said on videos or even here, it gives me that feeling
Mhm.
where I'm like, man, I wish I could jump back in time to 1999 and try to understand him then.
Yep. I
It would
couldn't
have changed me.
imagine. Because like that person then is not the George we have now, unfortunately, and
Yeah,
you can see it. Like you can watch any interview from that Phantom Menace era with that version of George, and he's very chipper, very lively, very excited. Then by the time we get to Revenge of the Sith, he's kind of more blasé because he felt more scorned. He thought what he was making was the like peak of his time, and it was, but like he thought it would be well received by everyone because it was still George Lucas's Star Wars, and
yeah,
like
yeah.
and the fallback of it,
Hmm.
like, uh, and now we're seeing this with Kathleen Kennedy, where it's like it's so unfortunate, but like you just got to let these people tell their stories, right? That's
Yeah.
what they're there for. That's why we
Well,
trust them in the first place.
yeah, no, it's Midi-Chlorians is part of the sequel or of the prequel trilogy legacy that will always be looked at with a little bit of side eye, and I get it
Mhm.
because it's not an easy concept, and it is what it is. But and being part of the generation that went like, whoa, what's going on? But I feel for George, who I can only imagine, and I would not think he would say it out of hubris or ego, but he would kind of be like, I gave you art and you threw it back at me. I gave you
Yes,
deep thinking. I gave you
yes.
something more than what you saw on the screen, as I did before. But I
Mhm.
did it for a new generation, and you turned away, and that's why but he still goes on, pushes on to Clone Wars, and he still
Mhm.
goes deep, and he still finds the right people around him to go. You know what? Like the whole Mortis thing is still like
Amazing.
Mortis is celebrated as it should be as this great arc in Clone Wars, right? If you ever have a bar conversation, you like Clone Wars, yeah, what are some of your favorite episodes? The Mortis arc, right? It's weird to hear that, but have the same people be like, you know what, stupid Midi-Chlorians. I'm like, it's the
But
same
it's same
thing.
thing, man. Same thing. And like, funny you bring it up, but like, I always gravitated towards luminous beings. Are we not this crude matter? Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's a total George Lucas line, but like, that is a total midichlorian line, and it's been there,
Hmm.
like
Hmm. Hmm.
it's not new. And it's not like he's trying to say they have the force because of midichlorians. No, it's someone's openness to the force. If you can stay in tune with the force, then yes, you are more open to it. And I think he's even said like midichlorians are in every character in Star Wars is like
Yeah.
blood cell. They're
Yeah.
just there. They just it depends on how open you are to them that you can receive them and
Yeah.
feel the force flow through you in that way. And like you got someone like Omega, which is one of my favorite examples. Omega has a great M count, has a
Mm.
very good M count, not force sensitive,
Right.
right?
Right.
But that was what Palpatine was looking for. How is he going to make these clones for Project Necromancer? How is he going to clone
Yeah.
himself? And then
Yeah.
she gets away. Grogu, another example. Moff Gideon's like, "No, I'm going to clone myself." Right?
Yeah.
High M count gets away. Right? It's all about this idea that has been perfectly, I think, continued throughout the saga. And like, can I go on a soapbox for one thing?
Oh, of course.
One thing. I gotta ask you?
Yeah.
Did the Anasaia twins from the Acolyte negate anything about Anakin Skywalker's origins?
Never. Never.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
And it's
Thank you.
and Mother Anastasia is one of my favorite things about the Acolyte. She's one of my favorite new characters in Star Wars, and shame the show doesn't go on, but also for me a personal shame that we're just not going to get more of that character. Yeah, no, first of all, we never get all the answers. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. No, I've had this offline discussion with friends. It's such a surface level gut reaction to say that has anything even to do with Anakin.
No.
Let alone destroy it.
This is the principle that makes me mad, because whenever that episode came out in the finale, they're like, "Oh my god, they just ruined Anakin Skywalker." I'm like, you didn't watch it, okay? Because it's clearly stated that the thread is obviously their understanding of the Force, and what the thread is tied together cannot be separated. But the problem was that Mother Coral was pregnant, and Mother Anasaia decided to do some sort of witchcraft, voodoo, magicry, and split that consciousness into two consciousnesses, right? So we know Anakin was born of the Force. He is a product of literally the Force. Whereas this, unfortunately, the Anasaia twins, no wonder they're more dark side fluent, was that, they are literally split personalities from the Force. They are a split organism. The dark side manipulated them to be that way.
I was going to say, to me, I saw them as an unnatural manipulation.
Yes, and it's kind of like the opposite of Anakin. Whereas everyone's like, they're the same now? They just ruined George Lucas's Star Wars. They just killed Anakin's origins. No, it is actually the idea that is completely opposite. One is born of, one is manipulated by. And like, they both fell to the dark side. Scott, how did they do that? Well, you got to think, what did one of them want? We don't know fully Osha's full circumstances. Unfortunately, I wish we did. But if you look at, Anakin just wanted to save his wife. Anakin, he was looking,
Power.
He was looking for power and
security through power, safety through power.
Yes. And you can't blame him. I think we've all gone through that. I think we all have a little bit of Anakin in us that people do not like.
That's the point. It's the
point. And I don't know. It really bothered me. And I feel bad for people that instantly saw that and they were like, "Oh, this ruins Anakin."
But because I don't mean to get grumpy and then comments come in, whatever. But like it doesn't. If someone engages with it and is able to explain a little bit more, happy to have those conversations. But I just think there's a lot of those, and the good faith folks out there, and they are out there, even those that don't like Last Jedi or don't like that, that exists. But I'm always saying, if that's you, we're not speaking to you. But to say, when someone's like, it destroyed Anakin Skywalker, you can't even tell me what Anakin meant.
Yeah.
You can't even explain that fully. You just know he's the chosen one, like he was on the back of a baseball card. And to me, it was an interesting exploration of the ideas around the Force from the other perspective, right? That the Jedi ain't the only ones with a claim on this stuff.
Yes. And I don't know. I know that George has his vision, and I know that it's something we can honor. And I love that pretty much every creator that has touched Midi-Chlorians since, or even the idea of like Force birth or whatever you would call it, hasn't really negated anything. And I'm afraid that people do watch and take these things in and go, that's not what George would do. And I'm sure there's some scenarios where you're right. I'm sure it's not what George would do.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
The Force has been 100% the most delicately handled aspect of the Star Wars IP. It has been it has to be. And like, because once you destroy that framework, then the framework of other things does fall apart. But my only sadness is it hasn't been expanded on near as much as it could have,
that's one of the things, and we're almost done here, but you could go on forever. But like, one of the final questions I think I want to have for you is going forward, not just in terms of predictions and tell me a story, but like, how would you want it handled? But to your point right there, I understand why it might be handled with a little bit of trepidation or kid gloves. You got the folks there that I do think understand it and understand it very well. Dave Dave, the leader of that pack, perhaps. I think that's fair to say. But yeah, I wonder. Sometimes I wonder why. But also, there's don't want to get into it, but yeah, the original vision for episode 9 that was out there on the internet, I think, was a gross misunderstanding of what even the balance of the Force was. It was a misunderstanding of a lot of the concepts, and I think that was part of the sticking point of what balance and this and that. And but it's easy. Yeah, I get it too. It's easy to miss, to understand. It's easy to misrepresent it because it's also very personal too.
Yeah.
Our connections to these stories and the Force and all that.
Of course, and where I want to see it go, Ken.
Yeah.
For me
Midi-Chlorians.
personally, I
Midi-Chlorians.
mean, they could stop here and I'd be happy, but there's
Mm-hmm.
some things, not that I'm ever having to kind of have deep concern of it, because this is still fiction. And George even mentions that, like, midichlorians are still fiction, but what you take with you isn't fiction, right? Like this connection that I have with you or the listeners or with people that I even teach and work with, like that is still a real connection of life and midichlorians, right? But the thing is, I'm not that I'm concerned about it, but I know James Mangold is going to be making the Dawn of the Jedi story from what we told. It's a biblical epic. And while that excites me, he has had quotes where he's like, I don't care about the lore. Like, I don't want to write myself in a box.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I can see it. Will they end up destroying midichlorians in the process? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I will they elaborate on it? Probably not. So like I would love if they hired me. No, I'm just kidding. I would love if they found some way to get some aspect of it tied or thrown out there. Like, and you never know, Mando and Grogu might have something.
There could be more with that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Mangold film and what Bo Williman's working on it with him, right? And I think it's going to be good stuff. But yeah, I would share your angst a little bit, but it also seems like it could be something that this is more about not understanding the power, just knowing that it's there and what do those do with it. Not if it's a biblical epic, it's not questioning. I mean, it can have definitely touch on it, but not questioning does God exist, but accepting that God exists, and what do you do with that when you come down off the mountain with the commandments and everything, and what do you then take forward? And I could see Mangold dealing with that and not having to worry or even maybe be interested in going beneath the surface, literally with midichlorians.
Well, like Rian Johnson to me is the one that has done it the closest and the best in The Last Jedi when Luke has his whole first lesson and they talk about, death feeds new life. Right. And like that's literally a line from it. And they had that shot of the whatever it is, some sort of some animal in the bones. And the next shot is the plants rising. And like, the life cycle is a real thing. Like that is something that I find deeply fascinating. And like, they could totally address it in that same way. And it answers the questions and it also addresses the thing. The Force does connect life and death. And that's, if they even just give us that, that's beautiful. And I just know that when it comes to this topic, I hope this audio experience that you're having right now, and this panel and future other material that can show up in the near future at the end of my panel, you never know. I hope this stuff does enlighten people and go, oh my God, I've never considered it that way. Because when you write stuff like this and you're really reflecting on it and you listen to other people talk about life and biology and the evolution and the symbiosis of all things, it does make you realize a lot more about yourself. And George nailed it with this. And I'm afraid that some people will never embrace it in that way. And I certainly have religiously,
Well, yeah, and look, here's the thing, and I think it's one of the greatest compliments you can receive is anything in life, not just Star Wars, but if you're passionate about something, you have feelings about it, and you're able to talk and share your opinions about it. When you have someone that says, you know what, I never thought about it in those ways, I think that's one of the most important things we have between us as human beings here. Oh, okay. That's fascinating to me and maybe even inspiring. Of all the years we've been doing ForceCenter, we have a lot of fun. We do silly things, we do stupid things, we go deep, we try to do it. We also just try to give the people the show that we would want. But when someone says, you know what, I didn't like Rise of Skywalker, then I watched your commentary track And at the very least, I'm going to watch it again because I've never thought of it that way.
Yes.
It's never going to be, those people never come back and go, it turns out it's my favorite film ever. Usually never happens. But they do come back and go, wow, yeah, it changed my way of thinking on it. I saw it in a new light. And I think that's part of what you got going on with Midi-Chlorians. For someone like me who's very interested in it, but also has a limited brain capacity and eats too many sandwiches at gas stations, I love hearing and watching you talk about it because even if it's like, yeah, I had thought about it kind of like that because I spent 11 years on a Star Wars podcast, but this has pulled me in deeper and makes me want to go back to Phantom Menace, a movie I love to watch, one of my favorite Star Wars movies. Just have on, just be like, let's find it. It is not just in that scene I mentioned up top. Yeah. It is in every corner of that film.
And like you can, it's one of those topics now that I feel like I have been so well versed in for 2 years now that I can almost bathe in it, and like I can't see it any other way. And that can be a problem within itself because now you're trying to do usually the crazy, like, okay, where's the connections at? And but look, when you listen to lectures by other scientists or other mythologists or other anthropologists or you name it, magicians, when you listen to these things and you go, oh, I didn't realize I could tie it to that. Like a lot of my time now is spent listening to lectures and going, oh, I see how George could have done that or how he did do that. And I don't know, I just hope I'm spreading the good word in a way that people can listen to it and accept it, because the last thing I want is for anyone to feel like their feelings aren't valid on this and their frustrations aren't valid. But I present it in a way where it won't even be addressed. You know what I mean? Like the power level stuff is not a single thing is that in the presentation, not even brought up, because I feel like it's such an antiquated way of approaching it that you have to just not even bring that idea into someone's mind. Because the second you give someone that idea, they go, oh, I think I like the power level thing more. But when you don't even address it, then it's not something that you even think about. So I don't know. I can't thank you enough for letting me do this.
I love hearing this, and I am bummed for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to be in Japan for Star Wars Celebration. Also, just wanted to see that beautiful country for the first time in that city, Tokyo. But I am bummed I'm not going to be able to miss this. And I get it. Star Wars Celebration is busy, and a lot of you out there, if you got into one of the big panels and it's going to take away from this, I don't want to speak for Scotty, but that's the way it works, and Scotty understands. But if you have the ability while you're out there to get to this panel, do it. Scotty talks about it with love, care, passion, and insight. And that's also one of the final things too. Knowing you or getting to know you, and seeing what Bombad does. And it is the silliest of the Star Wars shows out there. And there's a lot of wild, loud things you might put together with Jerry. And I remember, this pops up, and I remember thinking, I mean, I know they love the Phantom Menace. I know but I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was going to be references, jokes, who knows what. Again, I knew you loved it. It's beyond that. The way you speak on Midi-Chlorians is beautiful and important. So I want everyone to experience this. And the fun thing, this conversation goes where exactly it needs to go. I don't plan anything for these blank is why we love Star Wars. So I love what we said here. If there's anything on the table, we can get to it another episode that we've left off the table, I should say. But final things. Tell me again, tell everyone where exactly the panel is, the room, the time, everything, and you're all going to want to stay to the end of that.
Yes, you're definitely want to stay to the very end of it. Not going to say as to why, but there is a very special announcement. And for everyone in my life's like, is it a childbirth? I'm like, no, it's not that. No, I'm not announcing the birth. Literally, I've had so many relatives go, we thought we'd be prepped on this before you announced this. Like, what are you talking? It's not that. It's something more personal.
Star Wars
panel. More personal. Yeah. It is April 18th, the very first day of Star Wars Celebration at the University Stage. It's going to be about a 100, 200 seated room. And you can find a lot of good panels at this one, but University Stage stage at 3 p.m. JST. The only panel that is somewhat of the bigger panels during all of it is going to be the animation, 20 years of animation, whatever it's titled. So that is the only one, but it's halfway through my panel. So you can go see mine and go do that, or just come and stick around. We're here to hang out. And that is the time, April 18th, the Friday celebration. And yeah, there will be a published video of it on the Bombadcast YouTube channel by the end of it. So our plan is to have all that done by the end of the weekend. But that's the intentions there.
That's it. All right. If you're out there, you got to get out there for me, everybody, and cheer Scotty on. I still think we could take this on the road. I think we should have the Midi-Chlorian speech tour. I think could work.
I'm so down. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Figure out how to make that happen, how to make that a reality. Scotty, love you, man. Love hanging out with you. Love talking deep Star Wars stuff with you and the silly Star Wars as well. You and Jerry do some great work on the Bombadcast in an punditry world full of a lot of hate, scorn, and cynicism. You and Jerry have found your own brand of fun. So I want you all to check out the Bombadcast. Any final thoughts? Or else, we can just get out of here, Scotty. Tell me.
Stay Bombad. That's about it. Just stay Bombad.
Stay Bombad. Hey, for us, thanks for listening, watching us here on ForceCenter. Joseph and Jennifer and I, we're back to talk news, questions, live shows, all those things. I appreciate you all giving me the time to hang out with Scotty here today. You can follow us on social media at ForceCenter Pod. You can also get merch at tpublic.com/user/ForceCenter or Fourth Wall. The link's down below if you're watching on YouTube. Hey, like the video. Do all those things to help us grow. And you can support us directly at patreon.com/ForceCenter. Follow me at Ken Napzok. And if I can get my website back up and working, KenNapzok.com. We'll see you next time. That is it today. Midi-Chlorians are why we love Star Wars. Bye.